Alright guys, I want to do a quick troubleshooting video because I realized I wanted to go over this tomorrow, but I'm not going to be able to make it make noise during class. So let's say it's just not working at all. Like it's just not making noise. I've tried to fix some things. So I'm going to start with filling this back in because then I'm going to start over again. This one actually does make excellent noise. I feel a little bad doing this, but so if I need to fill this back in and do my cut over again, like I keep playing with it, I keep doing other things to it, and it's just not working. I might need to start over entirely and cut the mouthpiece off and do the whole thing over again. I would start with this though, start with filling this in. So put your popsicle stick in first so that you have something to push your clay against. Otherwise it's just going to push in and go everywhere where you don't want it to be. And then remember to use that wire brush tool to kind of simultaneously scratch and add water in this surface. Now it won't make noise. And then you can patch in, fill it all the way into that stick, kind of hold that stick in place while you do it. And just make sure it's all the way in there. Now, this is a lot firmer now than this clay is, so I'm going to let that firm up a bit before I try to cut it. And once again, I went over this in class on Tuesday about like leftover clay if it gets too firm, that you can wrap the clay in a wet towel. You can do the same thing with your ocarina if it gets too stiff. I can take a towel and I can wet it. One, I can rub over the whole thing a little bit. I do risk making that sandy texture come out a little bit when I do that. Or I can wrap the whole thing up. I'll probably take the stick out at that point. I can wrap the whole thing up and wrap it in my plastic bag and check it a little bit later. It doesn't even have to be the whole next day. The whole next day it'll be pretty wet. And I don't want my towel to be soaking wet or this will get really, really wet. I just want it to be enough to maybe soften the clay up. Okay, so let's say I made the mouthpiece too big. I just got carried away and I have too much clay on there. Then I would actually just cut it off. I'm just going to use this. As painful as this might be to do that, cut it off and remake it. Sorry. I was trying to mix really hard clay and really soft clay together and it wasn't working too well. So that's kind of big. I don't necessarily want it that big. So again, one of the big things that I wanted to be wide enough that that popsicle stick's not going to split up my edges, and I want it to be tall enough that if I'm putting it in the middle, it's going to come across what I think that bottom thickness is. If it's too shallow, and in order to hit across that bottom, I have to have it all the way up here, it's probably going to crack this area. So I just need it to be about twice the thickness of the sides of my piece, and I need it to be wide enough to not crack when I push that in there. Okay, so this is pretty soft, but this is pretty firm. So I'll go over that. And go ahead and go over this. And since I cut that off straight, I don't have to really shape this to fit it on. And then that's actually a little bit longer than I want it to be. And I just want to clean it up a little bit before I'm still on camera here. I wasn't on camera, was I? So I want to make sure that this shape is okay before I do that, so that I don't have to fuss with it too much after I have the opening, because I don't want to mess up the opening once I have it. but like I want to do this part, I want to do the sound part before I turn it into something else, because I don't want to be trying to do the sound when I've got things sticking off of it. It's this balance of when to do what works the best. All right, so that's solidifying a little bit. The old clay is kind of sucking some of the moisture out of the new clay, so it's firming up kind of quickly. All right, so I would basically make this piece again. So this is kind of a little bit of a review. So the one stick is going to go in, and I should feel it punch through into the opening. So I always want to use, I'll pull this out carefully, the beveled edge of this stick, and I want to push this through so it's sharpened through until it hits that. I want to just glide across the bottom if I can. This one is going to come just inside that thickness of the wall. I'm going to come out a little bit more just to be on the safe side until I hit the other stick. I'm still going to leave that stick in there. This one stays in. As long as I have to cut against it, it's going to stay in. My next cut is going to go at a 45-degree angle. So 90, 0, halfway. Straight in again until I hit that stick. And then if I have a sharper tool, that's better. But not that big a deal. Okay, move that stuff away from the sides there. So I made that opening really, really close, but I think it's okay. We'll find out. So I'm gonna basically wiggle the stick a little bit so that it releases from the clay. If I just pull straight back, then this bevel that I painstakingly made might stick to this and pull out with the stick and then get in the way. Okay, so troubleshooting things that can make this not make sound. So I can see something right away, which was when I pulled this stick back out, the clay that had stuck on the stick when I pushed it through got pulled back into it. So you can kind of see it in there. And basically what I want to do is I want to take a clean popsicle stick with the beveled edge and just use that to push that stuff in out of the way. I don't want to hit this edge of the bevel, but I want that stuff to get away from where the air is coming in. All right, so let's do that. Let me try it. So that's actually pretty good, but I probably could still fuss with it some more. You can see that I splayed out my mouth opening a little bit. Got a little bigger than I intended because I'm talking and doing this at the same time, essentially. All right, so, and because my clay is still soft. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller by squeezing it around it. And I'm going to go back in here and see if I can clean up this shape a little bit more. Things that can make this not make sound. One is clay in that air opening. One is having this opening either too big or too small. Not having a nice edge on that bevel. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if I don't have that edge in the right spot, then it won't split the air the way that I need it to, and it won't create the sound that I want it to. Let's try again. It's a little better, actually. So when I have a little bit of clay in there, I can see it. This works better when your clay is firmed up a little bit. So one of the things that can happen is if you're cutting this right after you put your piece together, this is going to be really soft. Like this is probably still a little bit soft because I just fixed it. And that's going to potentially cause problems because things are going to get deformed really easily. Joys of working at home. I don't know what I did with my X-Acto knife. Okay, so I can see some clay kind of bunched up. If you can see it on the sides here. I'm gonna just take a small tool and clean that away. Let's try again. So that sounds, I mean, it sounds good. I'm gonna muck it up intentionally so we can see what happens. If I have this not in the right place. It's a little worse. So yeah, let's say that I was messing with it and I accidentally pushed in my bevel too far. So I want to go back in, and I might have to kind of cut it off when I do that if it's really far. If I bend it way down. This is when I might need to fill it back in. I think though, what I can do on this is I can take this and kind of push it. I want to once again, put this back in there. This is important to have in there because this is where I want the bevel to be at the same point that my airway comes in. So right, this is a guide. It's exactly where my bevel needs to end is right where that popsicle stick is. So by having it to cut against, I have what I need. And again, I'm going to wiggle it a little bit, just a little bit side to side to kind of release it from there so that when I pull that away, it's still got a little bit of clay stuck to it, right? But not too bad. There we go. So all better, hopefully. And again, I can still see, like I've got a little clay inside that opening. I don't know if you guys can see it. They kind of pulled a little bit, so I'm gonna push it out of the way. See if that's even better. But I gotta get it all the way out of the way. That's a nice sound. So that's a nice tone, which is what I'm going for if I want to be perfect. Or if I want to make multiple notes. If I have it just barely making noise, and then I try to poke holes in it to make multiple notes, it's probably not going to fly. So again, because I'm talking and doing this at the same time, I keep wiggling stuff that I shouldn't wiggle. So I want that to be a pretty clean edge. I want it to be sharp. It doesn't have to be perfectly level. I just want it to be sharp. To keep it sharp, I want to kind of wiggle that just a little tiny bit to help it release. It would also help if it were cleaner. Right now it's not. Awesome. All right, now I'm going to leave it alone. So we want to watch for any clay that's in that opening. So I want to be able to kind of see light through it when I look through the end. When I look through here and I have light shining in from the side, I can kind of see in there. I want to see if there's any clay that got pushed out and isn't blocking the opening, but it's kind of in the way. You can see this isn't perfect. Like that cut's a little crooked. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. So at this point though, I want to avoid messing this up and messing this up. So I want to make sure that's kind of sealed. It was starting to crack there from messing with it too much. So everything that I build on from now on, I'm going to work around that. I'm not going to change the shape of this. I can build on top of it or on the sides once it firms up, but I want to be careful about squishing that mouthpiece. I want to be careful about squishing the sides in, pushing the bottom in, because if I push the bottom in, my bevel doesn't align with my opening anymore, and so I may have had sound, and now I don't. So I want to add things onto it without changing this structure. If I want this to be a different shape, the easiest way that I can do that is build on top of it. But, so, don't mess with it. Once you get it to make sound, if it's not making sound, you might need to fill it in. Try again. If I stretch this way out, I need to cut the end off and do the mouthpiece again. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. Seriously. Sometimes with clay, it's easier to start over than it is to fix the things that are wrong. Because if I've stretched this out, it is really hard to get it back in shape. And I was able to squeeze that around my stick when I had stretched it out just now. Usually I end up having to cut the mouthpiece off and start over. That is my actual last tip. Make sure your tools are clean when you're using them, because if you have clay on this, you're not gonna get a clean cut with it. You want to keep this the shape that it is, and adding clay onto it changes that shape. So clean your tools off before you use them. It helps if these sticks are dry too, so don't like uber wet it. Just wipe it down, let it dry, and then use it.